One of the things that is unfortunate about the parliamentarian's job, but someone's got to do it, is you're preparing for 10 of the next 5 problems. It's really a low-profile office. Some say it's the most important office you've never heard of.
There you go.
But trying to reach those leaders that are so respected on a human level will always be very memorable to me.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Capitol Spotlight. Today we're here with Tom Wickham, former U.S. House Parliamentarian from 1995 to 2021. Tom, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're very glad to have you here. We've been having some really cool people on the podcast recently who can give that really deep insight that a lot of Hill staffers just never get to experience in their time in D.C. So we're very excited to talk to you. And before we get started, I worked on the Hill for 3 years, and I'm not sure I could answer this question, but what is the House Parliamentarian? What did you do on the Hill?
That's a great question. It's really a low-profile office. Some say it's the most important office you've never heard of.
There you go.
The parliamentarian acts as the procedural advisor for the House. It's a small, nonpartisan office made up of 6 attorneys and 3 clerks. There's a parliamentarian that's on the House floor at all times, and their main job is to provide advice to the presiding officer when the House is in session, but they also deal with all different types of procedural issues, whether it be jurisdiction, germaneness, reconciliation, etc.
How long did it take you to fully understand that process so you could give proper recommendations?
Great question, David. All the parliamentarians are attorneys. They've all graduated from law school and are licensed by a bar, but the American law schools are not teaching the parliamentary procedure that you use in the House of Representatives. So much of it is on-the-job training that you're sitting and watching C-SPAN, learning the vernacular, learning the members, and then eventually you grow with more experience. Eventually, as I said, it took me 17 years before becoming the head of the office.
All right. And so when it came to learning all the members early on, what was that process like? How did you get through those flashcards or whatever it was?
Yeah, David, if you would have told me, young Tom Wickham, you're going to be memorizing 435 members of the House by name and by state, I would have told you I would have been awful at it. But you really get conditioned to do so with the help of flashcards, and then the fact that you live, sleep, eat, breathe the House of Representatives. You're there every moment that the House is in session, and watching C-SPAN and being on the floor so constantly that you start subconsciously, recognizing the members, and it becomes something that's like second nature to you.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think being a staff assistant in an office with C-SPAN all the time, going up on the wall, sooner or later you just kind of get to realize who those people are, but to go 435 for 435 is a whole different task. So did you have any fun facts on the note cards or anything too of their daughter went to this school or anything like that?
Yes, oftentimes you would have a fun fact, whether it be one particular member won a tight jeans contest, another was, a former professional athlete. But the main thing that was often used was whose place they took.
Okay.
Who they replaced. Oh, that person is in so-and-so's seat. And then we have a number of returning members. So always a break when a member comes back after being out of Congress for a while.
Gotcha. And so I used to work for a member who's on the Rules Committee, and I assume you probably worked pretty hand in hand with them to always realize what the latest rules updates are. How did that process work?
Yes, the Rules Committee is one of our closest clients. We're working with them on a daily basis. One of the unique aspects about the House is that the House can change its standing orders on a daily basis in order to bring up a desired piece of legislation. So we have individual rules that the Rules Committee puts out on a weekly basis to consider a particular bill. And what the parliamentarian does a lot is analyze those bills that are coming to the floor through the Rules Committee and then advising both the leadership and the Rules Committee on procedural defects and pathways to the floor.
Okay, good stuff. There's definitely a lot of paths I want to take this conversation, but before I forget, can we take like a little step back of how did you get to the Hill? Like, what was that process like first?
Sure, David, like many of your listeners, I started as an intern in the now 1980s, commemorating 5 decades here in Washington.
That's awesome.
In
Congratulations.
1989, I was an intern on the Senate side when I was an undergraduate, and then went back to my native Iowa after that, and really didn't think about Washington too much. Went to law school, thought I would become a county attorney in Iowa or something like that. But then the call of Washington, D.C. started becoming louder and louder. And then eventually I made it back to Washington with hopes and I thought a pretty solid commitment to work with the Office of Legislative Counsel. I was on law review. I had a familiarity with the editing process. Legislative Counsel made the most sense. But at that time, the Republicans and Newt Gingrich had just taken over the House, and Speaker Gingrich imposed a hiring freeze on Legislative Counsel. So the Legislative Counsel said, you cannot work for us, but the parliamentarian is looking for someone. And I said, what is a parliamentarian and how do you spell that? I had no experience whatsoever with parliamentary procedure. But then when I went and interviewed with the great Charles Johnson, who was the parliamentarian at the time, 2 very interesting people showed up during my interview to ask questions. One was Cokie Roberts from ABC News, the journalist, and the other was Sonny Montgomery from Mississippi, a longtime member and the author of the Montgomery GI Bill. And they both asked different questions of Mr. Johnson, and seeing that really sparked an interest in me. And I said, I'll stay in this parliamentarian's office for 3 or 4 years and then go back to Iowa. And now, 31 years later, you and I are talking here.
Fair enough. It's that classic, like, oh, I'm only going to be in D.C. for 2 years type of thing.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you have grandkids in D.C.
Yes.
But obviously, a lot of people also come to D.C., do their internships, and decide, hey, I want to go to law school. D.C. is the land of people who said they're going to go to law school that never did. So as someone who actually pulled that off, would you recommend that people go to law school? Does it depend on the circumstance? What are you thinking?
Absolutely, and I have counseled Hill staff that the general atmosphere, the culture is one that members' office, and it's such an ambitious place, it's such a place of intellectual curiosity that if you can go to law school while working and build up your seniority to take advantage of your Hill experience as well as getting a law degree on your own terms. The current head of the GPO, Hugh Halpern, a good friend, did it that way. That's something I strongly recommend.
Very cool. When it comes to how staffer life has changed over the course of your tenure in DC, what's the same? What's different? I'll start there.
Let's just start with the communication. When I began in the 80s and 90s, there was only one Hill publication. It was called Roll Call, and it was delivered twice a week on, I think, Monday and Thursday, and the Monday edition would be delivered to the offices on Saturday, which showed you what a delay there was in coverage of the Hill. Now that we have podcasts like this, Punchbowl, a number of other Politico, ones that really changed the game in terms of coverage and how information spreads through the Capitol, it's just like night and day. And then the other is staff resources.
Yeah.
There was just very, very little in terms of staff resources when I started, and it's just begun being built out both internally through the leadership of people like my current colleague Rodney Davis at House Administration, all the wonderful people that work at the House Administration office and in the CAO and leadership offices, and podcasts like this, that placing more value and intention on the daily lives of staff is something that really has changed tenfold since I started.
Do you think that, as being someone who's seen the news cycle evolve with Congress and being in the middle of all of it, do you think it's been a net benefit, net deficit? Like, where are we at on that?
I think it's been a net benefit. One of the things that I think was true when I started, and often what I viewed around me in Washington, is so much of people's identities were tied to their positions. And when you start with that as your baseline, that's not going to lend itself to work-life balance. And when you're entrenched in that way in your position, I think it also is a disservice to those people that you're representing that live their lives in very different ways.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a net benefit as we've emphasized work-life balance, and that has also brought with it, I think, a better relationship with the constituents that the Congress serves.
So what were hours like as parliamentarian?
I once made a rather silly goal, according to my older colleagues in the 90s, that I was going to be in the House of Representatives every moment that the House was in session during
Crazy
some of
man.
those early days. And during that time, they just limited special orders to midnight. So there were a lot of late nights that way. But it has really been a cultural change. As I said, my first boss, Charlie Johnson, used to say that Speaker McCormick, now the McCormick Award is named after him, and he had a great relationship with staff, was because he didn't have an ideal family life.
Yeah.
So the rule was when the speaker was in the building, every employee of the Capitol,
Yeah.
from food service to parliamentarian,
Yeah.
had to be in the Capitol. And Speaker McCormick really liked being in the Capitol. Those kind of, as I say, not the most personal life balance friendly choices were much more common in the early days that I was in the Capitol, and I am grateful that we have evolved beyond that point.
For sure. So how do you figure out ways then and now to balance work and life and make sure there's a healthy balance there?
Well, I'm going to go back to that point about communications. The good thing is that people are covering Congress nonstop, and you have unlimited information to unlimited access to information. The bad thing is that people are covering Congress 24/7,
Yeah.
and you have unlimited access to information. So turning that off, I think, is really key. And then if you have, an analytical type of introverted personality where you're internalizing a lot of that stuff that you are taking in, getting a clean break from that communications. One of the things I like to do is a lot of hiking, and with that often comes very poor Wi-Fi, which is an advantage.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Notifications were off. Is there anywhere in particular that you like to hike?
Yes. One of my favorites is in the Shenandoah. It's called Old Rag Mountain. And Outdoor Magazine put it in one of the 50 best hikes in the world, and I agree wholeheartedly. And so I've done that nearly 20 times, and it's something that invigorates me, and it's very challenging, and then it's beautiful views and a rock scramble that's not common on the East Coast.
Yeah, for sure. Do you like to go out west to hike at all? Do you usually keep it around the East Coast area?
I keep it around the East Coast. My siblings, I have 7 siblings, one of which is quite the outdoors person, and he does Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, and a number of the California peaks, and then a nephew who is an extraordinary hiker. I'm luckily to have dinner with him recently. He had done all the 14ers in Colorado and just constantly seeking out the most challenging hikes, and that's motivating to an old guy like me.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it just stretches your brain in a different way too, compared to the hill where you're in the city, everything's bustling all the time, and you don't get much access to nature. So even if it is just going to Old Rag or going out west to switch up the pace and just take in the nature, I really feel like that's the best way for me to reset. So totally understand that. When it comes to that time on the Hill when you're parliamentarian, please just give us some insight into some anecdotes that you just really appreciated in your time on the Hill, members of Congress or certain situations in general that you'll just always kind of have burned into your brain.
Well, as I said, the parliamentarian is on the floor. There's a parliamentarian on the floor at all times when the House is in session, and anybody who knows the ebb and flow of the House knows that we do plenty of non-controversial suspension bills where it's not the most exciting thing in the world. But you have those situations, and then you also have those rather high-profile events like a State of the Union or the counting of the electoral votes. And when those leaders come together, specifically leaders from other parties like the Speaker Pelosi and Mr. Pence being together on the stage. Mike DeBonis, one of the local journalists, once tweeted that I had the most difficult job in Congress making small talk between those two, but trying to reach those leaders that are so respected on a human level will always be very memorable to me. And then 435 different journeys to how they became members of Congress, whether they were a former CEO of a company, a professional athlete, or were on public assistance at one time. All of those journeys really stay with me, and I like to reflect on those, that being able to interact with those type of leaders is really inspiring to me.
Take us through a State of the Union day. What does it look like from start to finish?
A lot of nerves. C-SPAN, I think, our great partner says we get about 1.5 million viewers per week on C-SPAN. I'm not sure if Howard's updated those numbers yet, but he'll correct me if I'm wrong. That compared to the State of the Union, which is about 40 million at times, it's very, very hectic. And then bringing together not just the members of the House, who you're very, very comfortable with, you've been working with them for a long time, but the Vice President as a presiding officer who does not engage in that role in the House, but for once a year or once every 4 years with regard to the counting of electoral votes, and then trying to pull all that together in this relatively small room with the extra chairs, and then the First Lady in her booth. It's all very, very exciting. And then a rare bit of trivia that the parliamentarian is usually the one that begins the applause when people enter into the room, because no one really remembers the protocol.
Fair enough. So when it comes time for the speech, in those last few moments leading up, what is your job?
Well, one of the things that is unfortunate about the parliamentarian's job, but someone's got to do it, is you're preparing for 10 of the next 5 problems. Okay. So Jason Smith, my wonderful successor, has in front of him about 10 different folders of various contingencies, going from the thing that happens every time, which is that the Vice President and the Speaker both name escort committees to what happened at the last State of the Union where someone needed to be removed.
Yeah. So walk us through what that process would be like on your end if you were in that situation. What do you have to do?
One of the most difficult things is you have the preparation, as I said, being ready for 10 of the next 5 problems, but the question of when to pull that trigger. And so there'd been a lot of coordination, I'm sure, with the Sergeant at Arms and the Speaker's team. There's specific language that the Speaker uses to admonish someone to get that person, hopefully, to follow the rules, and if they don't, what needs to be said to trigger the Sergeant at Arms to remove them. But the question of whether this is a problem that will solve itself or something that needs the action of the Speaker of the House is one of the most stressful determinations for a parliamentarian.
So I already tried to ask you who your favorite speaker was. You're not going to give me that, but do you have any specific stories that you like to share about ones in particular?
Yeah, I think just some general thoughts. Speaker Gingrich was a great visionary, continues to be a very strong intellect, and with that national profile that he had, it was really important to have great staffers like he did, Arnie Christensen, Jack Howard, Martha Morrison, and others, Mark Peterson, to be able to kind of hit those procedural marks that the parliamentarian cares very much about. Speaker Gingrich is very interested in colonizing Mars. The parliamentarian just needs him to hit the gavel and say the House will be in order. So working with his great staff to harness those thoughts and get it focused on hitting your procedural marks was one of the great triumphs of the office. Speaker Boehner and I really had a nice rapport. He's from a big family, a working class family, and worked his way up, very plain spoken Midwesterner, so he and I got along very well on that front. Paul Ryan had a great talent to be able to not just sit next to someone on a bar stool and talk about the Packers or plumbing, or who your favorite plumber is in Wisconsin. He can do that, but to also be able to transition to speak at a boardroom about the deficit and entitlements. That was a great skill that Paul Ryan possessed. And then Speaker Pelosi was the strongest whip I've ever seen.
For sure.
And she really did a good job of making sure her caucus was together. And then even when she was Speaker, working with the whips team to unite the caucus and bring them in an important direction. She also had very long-term capable staffers like George Condanis and John Lawrence, and were really a pleasure to work with them and the skills that they brought. And then finally, McCarthy and McHenry were great people to work with. I didn't work with them in that capacity. McHenry gets a special award for his service to the House in one of the most trying times. And then finally, really have a lot of respect for Speaker Johnson as an attorney, the first attorney to be Speaker since 1993. And you can tell that he has a very deliberative style that pays off with his legislative successes.
Do you think he makes a parliamentarian kind of pull their hair out less than other ones because he kind of understands that process
There
more?
is a lot of overlap. There's a reason why all the parliamentarians are attorneys, are a foundation in the Constitution. So much statutory analysis, so many rules that have to be interpreted and massaged and explained. He really has a head start on that, and then can manage that along with all the other challenges of being Speaker of the House.
challenges?
Yeah, right.
But so when it comes to like the relationship that you have with the speaker, how closely are you working with them? Are you guys hand in hand a lot of the time? Is it more of a cordial relationship? What's it like?
David, it's so close of a relationship that the Speaker's office and the Parliamentarian's office, each 209, has been shared since the 1920s. The Speaker has so many responsibilities with regard to setting the agenda that having the Parliamentarian's office in the same physical location has been something that the House has had in place nearly for 100 years. Now, the Parliamentarian has separate space to allow for the Parliamentarian to maintain those confidential discussions with both majority and minority members. But the synergy between the Speaker's office, the Parliamentarian, and the Rules Committee is something that's really been in lockstep for almost the last 100 years.
Makes sense. Is there a specific vote in particular that you really remember fondly? Or like, oh my gosh, that was so chaotic, I'll never forget that?
Yeah, it's interesting now that I work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a business organization. The TARP vote following the financial crisis in 2008 was especially memorable in that the first attempt to pass that relief program went down, and the stock market also plunged at the same time, such that members were coming up to the chair saying that this was an economic catastrophe, and that all of these very, very dire predictions. The good thing about that was that they got it turned around, and within a couple of days we're able to pass that. And that's something where all the leaders of the country, Secretary Paulson, Leader Cantor, Speaker Boehner, Ms. Pelosi, all got together and really put the needs of the country first. But that was a particularly memorable vote. I was there for the I was there for the body's longest vote, which was 2 hours and 50 minutes, as well as the shortest vote, which I think was like 2 minutes and 3 seconds. A little piece of trivia.
Yeah, that's great. As far as you got to experience 9/11, being in that office, and then the financial crisis, and then COVID as well. What was it like during COVID going to like virtual voting? You're a process guy, right? So how did you protect that during that time?
Well, one of the things that had been central to the process, and since the advent of video conferencing, and there's something ironic of discussing this on a podcast, but that physical presence was something that we had written a lot about as parliamentarians, talked about Jefferson's notion of collegiality of David, Nick, Rachel, and I all getting around a table, and that's how decisions were made. And then COVID really put that to a test and said, what can we do if we want to have an alternative form of voting other than by physical presence? And proxies had somewhat of a foothold in other legislative procedures. And so that was decided on. But it literally was a lot of, building the airplane while flying it. And not just for the House of Representatives, but for the country as a whole.
And so soon after, it's like, okay, I've had enough of this thing. Let's go off the Hill for a bit. What was the Chamber of Commerce your first job after the Hill?
Correct. I retired in October as parliamentarian, and then served as a senior advisor for a couple months to allow for the transition, but was fortunate enough to be contacted by the Chamber of Commerce and a number of House alumni. I had worked with Neil Bradley, Jack Howard, and others over there, new leadership in Suzanne Clark. And so I made the transition over there and have been with them for nearly 5 years now.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you're doing over there now.
Well, I work with, as I said, my colleague Rodney Davis, a former member, and a number of others on the government affairs team to try to advocate for businesses. My specific role, it'll be no surprise to you, is to offer that procedural expertise.
Yeah.
As anyone who's been following the Hill recently knows, that that process is really driving policy these days with reconciliation, not to be confused with rescissions, which the rescission bill will be on the floor this week. So trying to advise the chamber team on legislative pathways that are available under the Constitution, under the rules of the House, and then trying to explain that to our many members throughout the United States and the world. And that's been the best part, is in addition to the inside baseball, which I have been working on for 31 years, it's now trying to explain how the Congress operates to some new audiences in the business community.
Nice. With a little bit of separation now in your job, are you at home at night, like eating popcorn, watching C-SPAN, watching this all go down, or do you like to have a little bit of separation now where you don't have to be so involved?
Boy, David, you'd have to ask my wife on that. But
She's the only one who's going to give the fair answer, right?
yeah, there's been some strange hours lately. The Rules Committee met at 1 a.m. On the reconciliation bill, and I'd like to say that I was sound asleep without C-SPAN on, but unfortunately, old habits die hard.
Fair enough.
But it is a different parsing of what gets my attention. The parliamentarian's job, Jason and his team, have to cover so much, and as someone on the outside, you can kind of pick and choose what is important to follow, and that's a luxury that being on the outside affords me.
For sure. All right, I've got two more questions for you. One, getting to experience so many different leaders on Capitol Hill and now in the private sector as well, what are some of those things that just consistently stick out to you that those people that are doing politics or business at the highest level have in common?
Well, ambition is one thing. When I do speeches to visiting chambers and try to talk to them about what is the difference between walking into the U.S. Capitol than walking into your local bank or into the biggest employer in your district, is that there is an atmosphere of ambition, that there's just over, I think, 11,200 people in the history of our country since 1789 to present that have been members of Congress. That's a very small group. They've spent, on average about $2.5 million to be elected. They have staffs of 15 to 20. All of those people coming to Washington to make a difference, being ambitious, and having a sense of that when you go in. Someone like myself from the Midwest, a stoic Midwesterner, tried to be low-key, that within those walls of the Capitol, ambition is not only present, but it's valued. Everyone has a plan with regard to how they are going to maximize their representational capacity. A lot of people have a plan for their professional development. A lot of people want to see themselves end up in the White House.
Yeah.
And that is unique to what you see in Washington, D.C. versus what you're seeing in New York, Los Angeles, Toledo, Galveston, etc.
Fair enough. So, last question, got to ask everybody. Who's Tom Wickham outside of your job, outside of politics? Who are you? What do you like to do?
I thought about what I would do. I really appreciate good writing. I appreciate creativity. I've read every book by John Irving, the author of, the author of Cider House Rules. So, I've seen every Wes Anderson film now,
there you go.
including Phoenician Scheme, which
I could go on.
I recommend. I saw that. Very lucky to see that with my family. My wife has not quite become a Wes Anderson fan, but my son has. So I'm recruiting, but trying to take in those creative outputs from some authors and filmmakers others might think are a little obscure.
Yeah, I think if you're pulling out Wes Anderson right now, he's definitely a film guy, right? So, like, are there any other people for you that really stick out?
Well, I deal so much in convention, bringing people to the norm, representing the rule of law, representing order, the Constitution, rules, that those fictional depictions of someone who is a rule breaker, or someone who is a little outside of the ordinary appeal to me.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Well, Tom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David, and thanks for everything you do here. Really great to see these resources offered to today's Hill staffers.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Thank you for tuning into Capital Spotlight Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe to our channels to stay updated on new releases, share the show with your friends, and rate the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. For more from Connect, subscribe to our daily newsletters, follow us on social media, and check out our website, all at Capital Connect, capital with an O, CNCT. See you next time.